Hello and welcome back to my channel. So glad you've tuned in, and I'm happy to be back after a short internet hiatus. Just happy to switch on the camera and talk to you guys and check in and find out how you're doing. Thank you once again, and I'm here to talk about the fantastic film Guardians of the Galaxy. I was blessed to watch this recently, and I would love to talk about it when it's still fresh in my mind. So let's go into this right now. Now, the movie starts off from Volume 2 where it left off. They have some newly found fame as the Guardians of the Galaxy, and surprise, surprise, they're using it for personal gain. So I found that just off the bat really funny. So we find them saving some batteries, and they've been sent by a group of beings who have genetically modified themselves to perfection, and we will talk about that. What they call perfection in quotes a little later. But basically they are fighting some intergalactic being that wants basically to either consume those batteries or something. But that opening sequence, I've got to say, it was just amazing. Seeing Baby Groot in the foreground dancing around when all the chaos and the mayhem is breaking loose around him was just so funny. And he is so adorable, Groot. And every time one of the Guardians would get thrown near him when landing with all, all the weight and so much, of a thud, and you were just so concerned about Groot. I was literally holding my breath, hoping that nothing happened to him. He seemed so fragile in the midst of all that. So that was just so interesting. And I've got to say something about James Gunn. He has an eye for action that even in the midst of all of that was going on, there was just so much to consume, and it was so beautiful, but you could never lose yourself in it. You could still know where everything was if you chose to just fix your eyes on a certain point of that action, whether it was Baby Groot or just the fighting in the background. There was just so much to take in, and I've got to say, I've got to watch this movie again. It is that good. So yeah, back to the opening sequence. They finally do save the day once again, Guardians of the Galaxy, and they are on their way as we discover that Rocket has stolen some of the batteries, and then basically they are pursued by these people. I think they call themselves Sovereign, which is funny, and they think they are so perfect that the part that just made me crack up right there in the cinema in laughter was they don't even physically go into battle. They send some kind of remotely piloted kind of, okay, we would call them like drones, but whatever they were doing was remotely piloted spaceships, and it was just so funny every time they were trying to come after the Guardians and seeing the Guardians take them out, and then the actual people who are back at their base just being taken out of the game. For them, actually, it was like a video game of sorts. So that was just funny. How James Gunn came up with that was just really, really interesting. Anyway, so basically we get the character Ego introduced as he saves the Guardians of the Galaxy, and he reveals himself to Peter Quill as his father, who had, a relationship with his late mother, Meredith, and they go off with him, leaving Rocket and Groot behind with Nebula, who, by the way, they were going to deliver back to the Nova Corps. And I think they wanted to drop Nebula off for some reward with the Nova Corps as well, I think. So basically they go off with the father of Peter. The father, at that point, they're not sure who he really is. And Mantis is also introduced, an empath. So, gosh, I've got to say that I loved her character as well. She is so innocent, so pure, and the dynamic between her and Drax is just so sweet, and I totally think those two will be shipped in the future installments of this film. So yeah, as a by the way. So basically we see that Peter Quill, as he gets to know that this is his father, it's actually revealed that in fact he is who he says he is, and we see that Peter has some powers that his father can help him come into. I think that was really interesting to explore. I was wondering if it would go to his head that he could be, some super powered person apart from someone who relies on like tech for his support. So also it's interesting that as Peter discovers his powers, that it doesn't really puff him up. All he wants is his friends to be happy for him. And then we have that touching scene where Peter and his newly found father, they get to play catch together, and that was just so beautifully executed. I literally welled up in the cinema where I was. In fact, there were so many moments in this movie that just had me crying, and I just tip my hat to James Gunn, to the writers, just whoever thought of that scene, God bless them. It was so impactful, and just I have no words for how beautiful that was. In fact, talking about just beauty in this film, the whole aspect of exploring emotions in these characters, just not having spectacle, but actually coming to understand the motivations of everyone in this team was brought to light so well. And I'm just going to leave off and talk about Yondu here for a moment. We also see him being given some more backstory, that he was in fact a part of a larger group of Ravagers, and he in greed actually started dealing in kidnapping kids, and the Ravagers had a code that they would deal in anything else but children. So Yondu is actually cast out from the larger group. And then we do see Sylvester Stallone's character being introduced, and the fact that Sylvester Stallone owned it as a Ravager, you could feel that he was just the overall, leader and someone they all looked up to. And just seeing Yondu wanting to be accepted back into like the fold, and them not even giving him the time of day, it really gave Yondu such just some more depth to him. Before he was just more of a funny character who always talked about eating Peter Quill and his team not eating him in Volume 1. So seeing this side of him was just a treat, and you fell in love with this character even more as they continue on. And in fact, this whole film was just one big emotional journey for all the characters. And when it's so easy for superhero movies to fall into the trap of spectacle, but James Gunn and the team, they steered clear of that. This film was layered, and we were able to see just what motivates each of these characters. And even we go into the story of Gamora and Nebula, how their whole life was this one big competition in order just to survive. And even Nebula just crossing the galaxy just to get a win for her own self. So that was just also a very powerful moment, and seeing them reconciling and getting to call each other truly sisters. Not only them, we have that moment with Drax where he talks about his family and his little girl, how she used to play in a place that was similar to where he and Mantis were sitting. And Mantis has this moment where she touches him and she just cries. That was also so sweet. Oh, I just love those two together. And then we have Rocket and Yondu. They both had something similar in them, that they hid behind a tough exterior, but inside they were really big softies. And I love the fact that they were just having that facade that he and Rocket had come down, and allowing themselves really to receive love and not, hide behind, being macho, or just being kind of ruthless as Rocket was. He was just saying some things to hurt people, and it was just great to see them acknowledge that part of themselves. And this film was just amazing. I loved it. I loved it. It was so much more than just a typical superhero movie. It had a whole morality tale. It had just so many complex themes throughout this. And God bless these guys for writing some of these scenes, because they were just amazing. And even just talking about Baby Groot, for me, he was so adorable, and he was just the glue that held that whole team together. Just seeing how they all wanted to take care of him, even in the midst of fights. They were just saying, Groot, get out of the way. And that was just so sweet. So this film was just amazing, in my opinion. And I've got to say one more thing about the music. James Gunn executed the musical part of score and just the songs that they added in very well. Nothing of those aspects of the film, which are great supporting characters to any movie, overwhelmed this particular film. And I love that James Gunn has said this in the past. He doesn't want his film to feel like a jukebox. That was actually what he said. He didn't want the music to overwhelm his films. And for sure, they accomplished that goal. So I just absolutely think that it was fantastically done. But we do see a spanner being thrown in the works. We find out that Ego is not, one of the good guys as we initially think. He actually wants to consume all the galaxies, all the universes, and make everything him, and he doesn't care. And he also reveals to Peter that he needs him to achieve this goal. So back to Peter Quill and his father. He is excited to join his father on the venture, and he has this whole sequence in the planet Ego, which, by the way, I've got to say, it was just stunningly brought to life. And I've got to say that James Gunn and his team, they brought that planet to life so nicely. And the fact that they took advantage of so much color and made it such a vivid experience was just amazing. You were just taking in the whole beauty of that planet, and it did seem like they had landed in a paradise. But anyway, as Peter Quill and his father are exploring this new part of their powers, which is basically consuming all the galaxies, Peter learns in that moment, I think his father slips up and says that he gave his mother a tumor, I think just to kill off that relationship. Wow, talk about extreme. And Peter snaps out of that moment in shock as he realizes that his father killed his mom, and it's like, no way. And it was strange to me that when he said his friends, and his father was like, it doesn't really matter. But when he spoke about his mom, and we know that Peter Quill's mom was such a special place in his heart, he just snaps out of that thing. And he's like, he's not going along with Ego's plan any longer. And then the mayhem ensues. But I've got to say something about that. Even seeing him taking on his father, it makes me think back to the scene when just how they start connecting as a father and son, and just seeing them with that dynamic of a father and a father who has always wanted to have, some kind of connection with his son as much as he had many other children all over. I have a feeling that Peter, for him, was special because of how even he had to kill off Meredith just to forget about the whole thing. And I think he really did have a special place in his heart. And also interesting, and by the way, that is rain you're hearing out there, but no worries, rain is a blessing. So back to the film. Interesting, as I was saying, that Peter, for him, as much as he wanted a dad and had even made up false stories to Gamora about, all the fantastical things that he wished his father was as he was younger on Earth, for him, his mother was a very sore spot. And he had not even returned to Earth because she had died there. So as soon as his father mentioned that he had killed her, he was out from that moment completely. And also, as another aside, it brings me to the wonderful character introduced of Mantis. She knew what Ego had been up to, having children all over and killing them when they couldn't, they weren't able, rather, to control the power of the light within the planet, and help him consume everything. And the fact that she was scared and even tried to warn the other Guardians, and it's also interesting to me in this. I'm going to also say this about Ego as a character. It could have been easy to make him just the villain who wants to take over the world, but I like the fact that they show that Mantis had to put him to sleep. Just talking about Mantis, even in this subject, that she was useful to him because he was always thinking about, his progeny, as they said. He was always thinking about his son. So that was interesting. And I also believe that that does give Ego more of a 3D kind of personality and help you understand him a bit more, apart from him just being the cackling villain. He did want a son. He wanted him and his son or daughter or whoever it was that was going to be able to help him achieve his goal, that he wanted them to do it together and to, accomplish greater, his greater goal, actually. And he wanted whoever it was to understand how to manipulate the power that they had. And I think he wanted a relationship to form between them. I don't think he wanted Peter Quill as much to be a means to an end. He wanted a relationship with him, and it's only when it wasn't gonna work, what consumed him, basically his goal to take over everything, I think it just superseded that. But I did appreciate that fact. It is interesting now that Peter has to fight his father to the death. And it's just so heart-wrenching because he's just found him. He's starting to form a bond with him, and now he knows he is a bad guy and he's got to go. So as he was fighting him, in the back of my head, all I was thinking is, what is going through Peter's mind? This must be so, just horrible for him to have to, even think about killing his father, much less now he has to actually do it. So that was in the back of my mind. It was just such an emotional battle taking place. And at the same time, before that, the actual battle, you can see that Yondu and the rest are just making some 700 odd jumps through the galaxy to save Peter. So as the final battle now ensues, I found it had so many stakes in this, because in the back of the team members' minds, they have to kill Peter's father. They can only imagine that they have to do that. Peter himself is fighting his father. Baby Groot is there, and I'm sure in the back of all their minds they're thinking, I hope he pushes the right button at the right time. And Gamora and her sister, they're trying to work together to get out. They were blown to the lower levels, so they were trying to help each other just get to the ship. And just seeing so much emotion in one battle scene that was so well executed. Hats off again to James Gunn, the VFX guys, the whole team. You never lost yourself in the battle. And seeing Peter Quill being able now just to control his gifts, his power to fight his father. He was, surrounding himself with rocks. There was even that Pac-Man moment, so that was funny as well. And yeah, that was just one of those, what's going on? But yeah, just back to the fight. And finally, Baby Groot gets to Ego's brain, and, he sets off the bomb. He chooses the right button, and then we have the emotional scene as his father tells him that if he actually destroys the planet, that he will destroy his chance at being powerful. And Peter answers him, what's so wrong with that? So that was also so interesting. And then finally, yeah, they win the day. But Yondu, and I've got to say that I just loved that, how he had to sacrifice himself for Peter. And that was another just emotional moment. I couldn't believe that he was actually going to give his life for Peter. And that was revealed when he said that Ego may have been his father, but he was never his dad. And there were all those scenes, I'm almost tearing up right now, even talking about it. All those scenes of Yondu and Quill and him, just teaching him how to use a blaster. Blaster, that was a Star Wars. Do they call them blasters? Gun. Okay. Teaching him how to use a gun, and just being a father to him, a father and a dad, actually. So it was, I think, a touching moment for anyone who's had an adoption story, that Yondu for sure had adopted Peter and had never quite just expressed the love that he had felt for him. That was the only thing that Yondu had done wrong. He always told him he kept him around because he was small and was able to slither into tiny places and steal for them, but he actually loved him. So man, it was just so touching. And the whole Ravager funeral, they all acknowledge him, even as he's died, and accept him back in the fold. And there's that moment when emotional moment when James Gunn's brother's character, the name is escaping me right now, but he shouts out, it's a big moment for him, and he's like, yep, it's a big moment for him. So yeah, I cannot wait to see what they're going to do with that character as well. He's taking over that mantle, learning how to use the whistle and, the whole contraption and, tech that comes along with that. So yeah, I did love this movie, guys. For me, it was well done. It was just brilliant, and I cannot wait for the next installment. I cannot wait to see these characters in Infinity War, what they're gonna be able to bring in terms of, the whole Guardians vibe to the Avengers. I think that's gonna be so interesting. So I'm gonna give Guardians of the Galaxy a 9 out of 10 or maybe a 9.5. It was just so good. And man, these guys, I just love them. I love them to bits. So thank you for tuning in for this review and discussion of Guardians of the Galaxy. Please leave your thoughts in the comment section about what stood out to you. I would love to read them and I will reply to you as soon as I possibly can. And if you did like this review, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you're new here. I would love you to be a part of this channel. I do love you guys as well, and I will catch you in my next review or reaction. God bless.